Yeah, there's a lot of different layers to what we're doing today. One is the property that we're on right now is it's 60 acres, and there's an old oxbow. It's a really unique ecosystem through here. We got farmland all around us. This oxbow along Three Hills Creek was dredged and drained a long time ago. I mean, so the oxbow is still here, and there's still sedge grass, and there's still some really good wetland grass in there. But we'd like to repair it. We'd like to restore it back to and hold water there, and so we have a lot of waterfowl. This is a big thoroughfare for wildlife that comes through here. So we'd like to create a space. There used to be a space. We'd like to recreate that space to what it once was.
We're working with a landowner and the local river watershed, as well as with Oz. We're planting in a riparian area, which is kind of the area where trees and water meet. So what we did today was we planted a bunch of eco-islands, which are essentially small areas of clusters of native species that are really biodiverse. So we try to get as many native species in there to increase that biodiversity and to increase the overall ecosystem services, whether that's with pollination services, food production for wildlife, cover and habitat for wildlife, water management by creating more macropores with roots in the soil to really increase that moisture infiltration into the soil, as well as providing nitrogen fixing through certain species like Canada buffalo berry. Essentially, with these clusters of eco-islands, we'll hopefully eventually see kind of like a forest structure take shape, kind of patches in between, but as it ages and matures, those patches will kind of fill in as the species sucker, reseed themselves, and eventually you'll kind of have a really unique local native forest structure kind of right in the middle of the prairie here, where trees and native shrubbery would be anyways before kind of the land was cleared.
When we're looking for different landowners to partner with and different properties to restore, we're first looking for landowners that are great stewards of the land. So we're looking for folks to come forward who appreciate our environment and who are looking to restore our habitat and all of the different interconnecting aspects of that through restoration projects. So for example, on this property, we've got a great land steward. We've got low risk for environmental hazards for our trees, so cattle don't have access to this property. They can become a hazard to the growing trees. So there's no risks to the area being farmed or disturbed in the near future. We've got the riparian area that supports the trees through the extra water or additional water going into the system. And then we've got this great location. So for our organization, we really build capacity through community projects. And in this property, we've got accessibility, we've got great sight lines, lots of opportunities for different partnerships to come together, and then for this project to build into other projects as well. So it's a great community opportunity.
We just planted 2,000 trees, 2,000 flowering trees. So we're going to plant flowering grasses and legumes as well as flowering trees. So we're going to create like a pollinator habitat. So we're going to try and encourage areas where we can encourage pollinating species, pollinating insects, bees. Bees pollinate a third of the world's crops right now, if not more. So super important to our ecosystem, super important to our food production. So I want to take an area like this and just show what could be done. But I have a vision of taking some marginal lands that were not farmed very well, or at least just to set aside areas that we could, allow pollinating insects and bees to forage all season long. So from April all the way through October. Because right now we're, in the prairies, we're predominantly wheat, barley, canola, and peas. The flowering periods are very short. Alfalfa, for 3 or 4 weeks that it's flowering, and then we bale it and cut it, and then that's it. So the bees specifically don't have a lot of variety in their diet. And if we could have healthy bees and healthy insects, that helps control all the bad insects that try to attack our canola crops. So it's just good all the way around.
Definitely, just from how we've changed the landscape, especially in agricultural areas in Alberta. If you kind of look at satellite view of Google Maps, you can kind of see it's almost these, up around Grand Prairie and down here, where we've kind of cleared a lot of this native habitat, and especially around these riparian areas, that if we were to, work to connect with, landowners and their neighbors and the counties and all kind of work together, we can, bring back that habitat connectivity. Oz as an organization has seen a really big influx of a lot of landowners reaching out to us, and there's a lot more interest in bringing back these treed landscapes. So it's a really positive future outlook.
It starts here. This is just one little project. If we could have 50 or 100 or 200, 400 in our community, all of a sudden the beneficial insects, the pollinators, like it would just be teeming with beneficials. So that's nothing but good for canola production, nothing but good for alfalfa production, and nothing good for peas and all our flowering crops.
If you have marginal land, that aren't really productive or aren't really, beneficial for crop production or forage production, I would say to look into, some of these planting projects just for the variety of ecosystem services they can provide to, crop production and livestock production. In the case of crops, the pollination services that can come out, the water management, retaining snow buildup, so you have a recharge in the springtime from the spring melt, as well as acting as kind of a sponge to hold that water in and then release it slowly during periods of drought. They also provide protection from wind erosion, and in the case of livestock, they provide protection from stress from that wind, that same wind, especially in the winter with the wind chill. So we have higher production value there, happier cows. And yeah, just even if you have, to take out a little land out of production, usually we find that the return on the ecosystem services increases your overall production value just by taking out a little bit of that land and returning that to a native habitat. So I would say, yeah, there's plenty of pros and very little to lose.
I'd really encourage people to take a look at some of the marginal lands that, like, we're farming them and then we're questioning, why we're not really making any money. So really, in some cases, it's at best your break even. So why are we farming it at all, other than to keep the weeds down? Well, just plant it to pollinator species and legumes and flowering plants and trees. Set it aside, and let's stop wasting our money there. And at the economic benefit then becomes all the pollinators that get to hang out and help us out on our insect control, essentially. Let's call it integrated pest management, if you want to call it that. Yeah. This was actually is provided through grant money, so it didn't cost me anything. It cost me time, and I was just amazed that people would take days off during the week to come plant trees for 5 hours. But you know what? Many hands make light work, so it really worked out quite well. So the grant money, pays for the trees and the time, and if everyone had sensitive areas that they could apply to have, some funding to pay for the trees, pay for the species, man, why wouldn't you do it?
Hopefully, in 10 to 15 years, you'll kind of see a miniature forest here, and then as it matures, with those white spruce kind of working to be the climax community, you'll have kind of a quasi prairie parkland forest ecosystem.
We're anticipating that these trees will be the start of a riparian eco buffer. So they'll be the beginning of native tree species encroaching into the riparian areas along this creek.